World government is the structure necessary for global justice.
I'm in a position to speak my mind, and by God, I'm going to do it. We Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the President of the General Assembly for convening this critical meeting focused on galvanizing momentum for universal vaccination.
Excuse me, on the left over here, we have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics. And this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene.
Today we must develop federal structures on a global level. To deal with world problems, we need a system of enforceable world law, a democratic federal world government. Most important, we should sign and ratify the Treaty for a Permanent International Criminal Court. Pat Robertson has written in a book a few years ago that we should have a world government, but only when the Messiah arrives.
I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
President and future President of the United States of America.
He wrote, literally, any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil.
I'm pleased to announce the second coming of President Donald J. Trump.
Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
I am the chosen one. I am the chosen one.
Perhaps it is no accident that the numeric value of Donald Trump in Hebrew is the same as Messiah, son of David, Mashiach ben David, 424.
No.
Like the UK embassy.
Oh, the UK.
Since you're Jewish, Messiah, so the head rabbi just saying, we took the president Donald Trump's name, and we came out with the same lettering as the Messiah.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States. So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Guys, if you enjoy this and the content that I put out, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Feel free to check out my channel. I have tons of other stuff on this subject matter. And if you have any suggestions, you can leave those in the comments, and I will happily oblige those when I'm able to. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the video.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on an exploration of something really complex. Definitely highly controversial. Our mission is to take this source material, specifically Chapter 10, Spiritual Control, and really unpack its claims about the spiritual side of mind control. Specifically within this framework, the source calls Monarch Programming. Now, before we jump in, just a reminder, our role here is to present the source material as it's written. We're laying out the claims for you. We're not here to endorse them or validate or, argue against these viewpoints, which are frankly very contentious. We just want to guide you through what this chapter says it reveals.
Exactly. The goal is to help you grasp the core ideas without getting overwhelmed. And this chapter, it claims to uncover some of the most, guarded elements, definitely some of the most debated info about this alleged programming. It's framed as a deep dive into the spiritual underpinnings, you could say. So we'll methodically lay out these assertions just so you can understand the details the source is claiming to disclose.
Okay, let's start unpacking this then. The source brings up this idea it calls the 10th science, and it presents it as information that's deeply feared by the alleged programmers themselves. So from the source's view, what is the spiritual foundation they're supposedly building?
Well, what's outlined is, it's pretty specific. The source asserts that generational spirits are laid in the womb, and then once the children are verbal, these spirits are introduced as friends or spirit guides. Sometimes they're called totems.
Sometimes they're spirit guides.
Yeah, and the chapter claims these guides get deeply integrated into what it calls a child's cult parts, which seems to mean specific, sort of walled-off personality fragments. And this happens from as early as age 5, supposedly. It even says genealogical histories of these spirits are taught.
Wow. Okay.
And it makes this connection.
Guys, I want to encourage you to check out Pastor James Carner's new book. It's called Breath War. It really talks about stuff like this. The idea is that God creates man's spirit, that is the divine breath. He breathes it into man to animate us. And the idea is that these fallen angels, these Nephilim, feed off of divine breath. They're parasites to it. So the idea is that they have to get us to consensually give up our breath. This was first done by Cain when he murders Abel. This creates a legal claim that Satan can use. They chose evil knowingly. So I really encourage you to check it out. The book's available for free. I'll put the link down in the description.
It draws a parallel to American tribal chief candidates waiting in the wild for their totem and links that idea to the Illuminati studying something called Zibalian mysteries in the Popol Vuh. That's an ancient Mayan text, suggesting this stuff has deep historical roots, according to the source.
So based on that description then, how does this 10th science differ from, say, just regular demonology?
Yeah.
And what bigger impact does the source claim it has on someone's worldview?
Right. The source emphasizes it goes beyond just demonology. It supposedly tackles fundamental things like your view of God, what spiritual fellowship means, even how you see things the source calls occult sciences, astral projection, ESP, telepathy. It's presented as this really comprehensive spiritual framework, aiming for total control over someone's perceived reality, both spiritual and mental. Moving on to how these ideas are supposedly used, the chapter outlines a few main categories of spiritual manipulation. The first big one it describes is isolating the victim from God.
Isolating them from God. Okay, so once that spiritual isolation is supposedly set up, how does the source say it's actually used in the programming? What kind of tactics does it mention?
It describes what it calls a chilling tactic, basically creating intense anger towards God through staged events.
Staged events, like what?
Well, the example given is pretty grim. Someone plays God, abandons a 6-year-old child in a life or death situation, and then supposedly the child is strapped into a coffin, lowered into a pit.
Oh my goodness.
And told they're a cat with no soul. And this is framed as a penalty for trying to pray. And beyond that, the source claims victims are implicated in what it calls gross sins, things like the murder of innocent children.
Why? What's the stated purpose?
The alleged purpose is to make absolutely sure they feel God hates them, which the text says makes them willing to do any sin without conscience.
That's quite a claim.
That's one reason that today you see a mainstream idea that people just hate Christianity. Seems like now in the modern age, people are genuinely not just opposed to it, but they have an innate hatred towards it. Either that or they're not real people. If you take somebody who's angry at you in like a comment section, let's say Facebook comments, and you just post a random Bible verse to somebody who's angry, they'll start seething with anger. So either those are robots or, in my opinion, those people are possessed. But there's a lot of hatred for Christianity now.
And then the source says this individual programming is like a miniaturization of things done to whole populations. So building on that isolation, how does this wider idea of dehumanization show up at the individual level, according to the source?
Yeah, the material claims that for any nation, the first thing they degrade is the state of man himself, turning people from spiritual beings into animalistic reaction patterns.
Okay.
And for individuals, the chapter alleges that alters of these dissociated states are created and then specifically turned into animal alters, like cats or birds.
How? What methods does it describe for that?
It describes some horrific methods allegedly used. Torturing a child in a cage with cats around, killing a child in front of altars to make them reject being little girls or boys, forced consumption of feces, even fake blood transfusions using cat blood.
Fake transfusions?
Yeah. And the stated goal, according to the source, is that these altars will pass lie detector tests because they genuinely believe they are animals.
And it's not just animal altars, right? The source mentions other kinds of dehumanization, too.
It does. It talks about puppet or marionette programming. It cites Dr. Mengele, alleging he used electroshock and these dollhouse skits. And there was this supposed rule number 8, you are puppets on a string, dance, marionette dance.
Just tell it.
Then there's the porcelain face programming. Victims supposedly believe their faces are burned off and replaced with masks. Or hearts of stone, where alters believe their actual hearts were surgically removed and replaced with stones. The imagery is, exceptionally graphic.
So what does the source say actually fuels this whole elaborate, terrifying system?
It points squarely at raw terror. That's the main vehicle, supposedly. It alleges the programmers strip victims of all control, even over their own thoughts, or it mentions the power to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And a core fear that's described as never being believed by therapists. The source sometimes accuses therapists of just dismissing the abuse claims as psychotic nonsense.
Right, the fear of not being believed. So besides just terror, what other psychological tools does the source claim get used heavily in this programming?
Well, the document details a lot of guilt, shame, ridicule, and anger being used. It asserts that victims are set these impossible standards of perfection and then torn down for any failure.
Constant failure.
Exactly. They're allegedly forced into black and white thinking, not allowed to feel natural anger or sadness, which, the source says, leads to self-incrimination. It even brings up Loretta Lynn, the musician. It claims her autobiography suggests her programming meant she could only credit her husband handler, Doolittle, for her success, highlighting what the source calls her programmed lack of complete control over myself.
Who are you? Who are you?
There is a sixth dimension beyond that which is known by most men. It is a dimension shared by the slaves of mind control. It is the lowest ground to which some have descended, and it lies at the pit of man's desire to control another. This is the dimension of trauma-induced terror, where all of the cataloged personalities and demons live, and the master can call the one needed to possess a slave for a particular task. It is an area that we call the Who Are You zone.
That's such a disturbing level of alleged control. So with all these psychological tactics, how does the source say anger specifically is used strategically inside the victim's system?
The source claims anger opens up spiritual portals for demonic activity. It's quite explicit about that.
Portals for demons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It states programmers purposefully push the victim almost to its breaking point to get angry alters. And these angry alters then supposedly act as gatekeepers for demons. It's described as a divide-and-conquer strategy. Alters are turned against each other, sometimes apparently trying to kill another alter.
Which would just reinforce dependency, wouldn't it?
That's what the source states, yeah.
Yeah.
Reinforces their dependency on the master to step in and fix things.
Okay, this next section goes into a really unsettling claim that the programmers set themselves up as God, or even superior aliens. What does the source say about that?
It asserts that programmers flat out tell alters they are their creator, their God. They even twist scripture and attribute it to themselves, supposedly.
Wow.
And it claims that experiences of alien contact that victims report.
The best way to understand this is really just a little bit of a thought experiment. If you want to, quote unquote, get away with robbery, all you got to do is dress up your crew. You know, one of you can be Mickey Mouse, the other one could be Minnie Mouse, Goofy. But the kicker is that you need at least one person in the crew to wear a gimp suit. That's so when the person that you've robbed goes to the police and says, hey, I got robbed by Mickey Mouse and a guy in a gimp outfit, they're not going to be believed. And so they use these alien abduction, guises using Hollywood studios and stuff. They run Hollywood. And they'll do it so that people are never believed when they, say something. That's why it's done at Disney World. This is very common. I take no responsibility for anyone who may do that. So,
Often, it says, these are just elaborate mind control setups run by handlers. The material connects UFO phenomena to something it calls the Oz factor, which it describes as a kind of dissociative state, making victims suggestible and disoriented.
The Oz factor, like Wizard of Oz.
Kind of, yeah, that feeling of disorientation.
No.
It mentions the Time Life book, the UFO phenomenon, and the X-Files TV show as examples connecting these ideas. And it throws out this statistic. 100% of Satanists have had an experience with UFOs, according to polls the source references.
That's quite a statistic. So given how spiritual the source claims this programming is, how does it say demons get layered in, making them central to the whole thing?
All right, the document is very clear. Understanding Monarch Programming means seeing it as fundamentally demonic-based. That's the core assertion.
I'm going to post a link in the description to an article that I did. This is kind of interesting. I wanted to note it. Anyone who's familiar with computing, web development, anything like that, the operating system Linux, it has something called a daemon, Daemon. What it is it's like a background process. So it runs in the background. Like if you open up Task Manager on Windows and you look through all your processes, a lot of those that run in the background are called daemons. So a background process in a machine would be a subconscious bit of programming in a human. So perhaps the link between demons and Monarch Programming is that demons are subconscious, i.e. background, programming loops. I'll post the article in the description. I encourage you to read it.
It describes how demons are supposedly layered into the altars. It mentions specific ceremonies.
Like what?
Like a full moon Sabbath. An unbaptized child is allegedly sacrificed to Satan inside a pentagram smeared with fat from the dead beast and baptized in blood, all to instill absolute terror about talking. It also talks about other rituals, like using the Book of Beasts to summon demons, supposedly involving a skinned child sacrifice.
This is incredibly dark material.
It is. And then it lists specific demons allegedly found in programmed multiples: Legion, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Leviathan, Behemoth, plus a broader list of what it calls common types of evil spirits, like spirit of the Antichrist, spirit of bondage, seducing spirits, and so on.
And it even mentions physical objects being used, like rings.
Yes, exactly. Rings dipped in the blood of sacrificed victims, serving as focal points for ongoing demonization, according to the text. It names specific types: blue topaz, black onyx, diamond. Black onyx is specifically mentioned for supposedly capturing souls.
The level of detail is something else. Then the source makes this really interesting claim about misusing religious texts. How are scriptures in programming supposedly used?
Well, the material states that verses from every book of the Bible, and basically everything Jesus said, are twisted. They're reframed for program.
Twisted how?
Right.
And why?
It claims this works because, 1, secular therapists are often unfamiliar with the Bible, and 2, ministers are ignorant of Satan's devices. That's the source's reasoning. It even goes so far as to suggest figures like Billy Graham, who the source identifies as a monarch handler, allegedly used programming language in his TV messages.
Billy Graham. Wow, okay.
And supposedly triggered programming during personal meetings with survivors. These are major claims. The text gives specific biblical examples too, like the Genesis creation story being twisted for making altars, the tree of life used for a Kabbalistic tree of life, the Exodus plagues used for terror programs, Romans 9 about the potter and the clay used to teach altars. The programmers are the potter.
So the programmers are God, essentially.
That's the implication, yes. And Revelation 7 seals used for Armageddon suicide programming. It shows how deep the alleged twisting of Scripture goes.
So the source isn't just talking psychological manipulation. It claims actual occult practices are integrated. What does it say about Theta programming and psychic abilities?
Right. Theta programming is defined in the source as the marriage of occult practices with state-of-the-art science. The goal being espionage or psychotronics. It lists research groups, Duke University, NASA, as allegedly involved.
NASA.
That's what the source claims, yes. It also talks about warrior monks in the U.S. Army's New Earth Battalion, trained in martial arts and psychic warfare, supposedly getting into blood sacrifices.
Warrior monks, psychic warfare.
And it asserts telepathy is a closely guarded secret among these alleged Illuminati slaves, enhanced, supposedly, by demonic spirits and even surgical implants for remote signaling. Plus, astral projection comes up again as a key programming tool.
And there was that really specific claim, too, about the Philosopher's Stone and white powdered gold. Ormus.
Yes, Ormus. The source claims that enhances psychic abilities, links it to ancient Egyptian secrets, and names David Hudson as the modern discoverer. Very specific. So having laid out all these, extreme rituals and individual manipulation techniques, the source then kind of zooms out. It argues these same principles create spiritual bondage snares in society, even through things that seem harmless on the surface.
How does it connect these big ideas to something more every day? Like, it mentions gambling.
Exactly. The chapter identifies activities like gambling as being designed to ensnare people and introduce every evil spirit. That's the claim. It talks about the destruction of family lines, a mass-scale societal addiction to gambling, and claims this capitalizes on the traumas of certain groups, like American Indians. The overall conclusion the source presents is stark. It's a worldwide satanic conspiracy right under the noses of the world's citizenry.
Wow. Quite the conclusion.
So just to wrap up the key claims from this chapter,
Yeah.
we've looked at what it alleges as systemic spiritual control in Monarch Programming. The really disturbing methods of dehumanization it describes, the weaponizing of fear, guilt, anger, even scripture itself, and this supposed integration of occult practices, psychic warfare. It paints a picture of incredibly intricate, layered manipulation, all rooted in these spiritual assertions.
So as we've gone through this chapter, I mean, it really highlights the power of belief systems, doesn't it? Especially when you're presented with such detailed, meticulous claims like these. It certainly makes you think about how we process information, especially about really unsettling claims of hidden control or influence.
And it does raise a big question for you, the listener. If, as this source asserts, the world lies in the control of the evil one, and mass mind control is supposedly happening right under the noses of the world's citizenry, well, what does it even mean to find truth within narratives like this? And how do you navigate ideas of freedom when the source itself puts forward this strange idea that freedom means not to have truth? It's a lot to think about.
It really is. We encourage you to reflect on these complex and frankly disturbing concepts presented in the source material today. Consider how they might or might not fit into your own understanding of the world.